Computer Science. In this lesson, we will see how we can use some of the features of the Racket programming language to help us to manipulate images. However, before we can do that, we need to find some images for us to use in the Dr. Racket programming environment. There are two ways to get simple images into our Dr. Racket programming environment. But before we can use either of them, we need to find some images. So, go to your favorite web browser, go to Google, and go to images.google.com. Here we can do a simple search for something. Maybe I want to find an image of a frog. So I'm going to type frog in here, and you'll see I'll get lots and lots of images. One of the things we definitely want to do is find smaller images for us to use. So I'm going to click on the search tools, choose any size, and let's do an icon size, something that's a little bit smaller. Once we do that, you'll see we get lots and lots of images of frogs, and now I just need to select one to use. Oh, let's see, let's find a good one. I like this one right here. He's a happy little frog. So I'm going to click on this frog, open him up as a regular size image, and there's two ways to get this frog into Racket so that we can use him for some of our programming. One of those is to right click on the frog and select copy image. When I do that, I can go back to Dr. Racket and just do a paste and paste him right into the interactions window. Notice when I put a frog here and I press enter, I get exactly back what I gave the Racket programming language. I get a frog back. Okay. The other way to do this, we'll go back to our page, and if we right click on the frog image this time and say save image as, and I want to save them in a location, I'm going to do them in my documents, computer science, intro to computer science, and I'm going to save them in an images folder. I already have one frog, so I'm going to call this frog 2 and save him. Now when I'm in Dr. Racket, I want to get rid of these original frogs, so I'm just going to press run again. That gets rid of everything in the interactions window. This time my cursor's in the interactions window. I can go to inserts, insert image, and find that image in the same place where I just had it. Frog 2, open, and again if I press enter I get the frog back. Go ahead and take a few minutes and find several icon size images for us to use in Dr. Racket. Now that you've done that, let's do some things with these images. Let's manipulate them in some way. Before we do that, we need to load a library into Dr. Racket that allows us to do some image manipulation along with a lot of other things that we'll explore through the course of the next several weeks. I'm going to go up here into the definitions window, put my cursor and click. I'm going to type in up here require picturing dash programs, okay, and press enter. Now, nothing's actually happened yet because the only way we get things to happen from the definitions window is to actually click on run. Once I click on run, that library for picturing programs is loaded, and now it gives us access to a lot of other commands. For example, I can do something like flip vertical, and I'm going to insert my frog, close the parentheses, and press return or enter, and that frog has been flipped vertically. Okay. I want you to notice a couple of things about this flip vertical. Flip vertical is what we call a function in Racket. All functions are preceded by a left parenthesis. As we know from mathematics, all parentheses need to be closed. So what this function is saying is flip vertical, here's the image, the frog, close the parentheses, and we get that frog flipped vertical. There's also a function called flip horizontal. We'll do it to the same frog, poor frog. Now, he looks almost exactly the same, but this image was flipped horizontally. However, this image is symmetric about the y-axis, so it didn't really look like he was flipped horizontally. Okay. Try those two functions with several other images just to see what happens. I'm going to press run again to get the interactions window cleared. Also going to give myself a little more space. Let's take a look at a couple other functions that we have built in. Another one of these is called rotate CW. And again, I'm going to insert an image. This time I'm going to choose a different image. I'm going to do some cheese. So I'm going to do rotate CW in the image of cheese. Close the parentheses. I press enter. This image was rotated clockwise, 90 degrees. There's also a rotate CCW. I'm going to copy the cheese from up here. And now it's rotated counterclockwise. Well, guess what? There's also a rotate 180 for cheese, and this will rotate that cheese 180 degrees. Okay. So in a very short amount of time, we have now added 5 different functions to what we know in the Racket programming language, and specifically in the library for picturing programs. Okay. We have flip horizontal, flip vertical, rotate CW, rotate CCW, and rotate 180. You may want to make note of these functions for use at later times. Now, one thing you'll notice about all of these functions is they operate on just a single image. Okay. I'm going to clear things again. We also have some functions that will operate on multiple images. One of those is a function called beside. I can do beside with the cheese. Well, beside implies you're putting 2 images next to one another. So this function actually needs at least 2 images. There's beside cheese and frog. If I close the parentheses, I get the cheese and the frog beside one another. To go along with beside, there is above. This one will do what you might expect it to do. Put the cheese above the frog. So these are a couple of ways that we can combine a couple of images. One more way that we can combine images is with a function called overlay. Again, I'm going to use the cheese and the frog. We do overlay, cheese, and frog, and I want you to notice what happens. Here is overlay, cheese, and frog. We can also do overlay with the frog and then the cheese. Notice the difference between these two functions. Now, as with any programming languages, these languages are very particular about how you enter things. If, for instance, we tried to do rotate CW, here at the cheese in there, and press enter, all it gives us back is the words rotate CW and the cheese, because we didn't put a parenthesis in front of rotate CW to tell Dr. Racket that we are executing a function. Okay. If we put a parenthesis in front of it and the cheese, but don't close the parentheses and hit enter, nothing happens, because Dr. Racket is waiting for you to close the parentheses. It just did a new line to allow you to continue rotating CW. You can actually put a couple of returns in. As long as you finally close the parenthesis, it'll rotate it clockwise. Now, some of these other functions, such as beside, if we do beside in the cheese and close the parentheses, this will give us an error. If you read the errors carefully, it'll tell you what's happening. It says beside expects at least 2 arguments but found only 1. Remember, beside needs at least 2 things to put beside one another. Here, you only gave it 1. Also, the order in which you do things matters. If I do the cheese and then beside, and then let's put the frog in there, and press enter, Racket's saying, hey, wait a second, there was a left parenthesis. That means a function call. So it expected a function after the open parentheses, but found an image. It didn't like this. The order in which things happen is very important. The other thing you have to be very careful of with computers is that you type things precisely. Spelling mistakes don't work. Computers are very terrible at figuring out what you meant. So be careful with spellings. The other thing that's different is even capitalizations. If we do beside as all capitals like this, and we'll do the cheese and the frog again, Racket says this function is not defined. Even though you spelled it right and it's the right word, it's in all capitals. The function that we want is beside, all in lowercase letters. So be careful of some of these common pitfalls and mistakes. Now, we can also combine several of these functions. We can do beside, and inside of this do a flip vertical, and let's do the frog, and then do a flip, and let's do rotates CW, the cheese. Close that parenthesis, close the beside parenthesis. If we press enter, notice what it does. It flips the vertically, it rotates the cheese clockwise, and puts them beside one another. So we can put functions inside of functions, much like you would do in any particular math class. This allows us to create much more interesting images. Now, notice everything I've done here, I've worked in the interactions pane. You can put all of these same things in the definitions pane. As a matter of fact, I will select and copy what I just did, and I'll put it up here under Require Picturing Programs in our definitions pane. Make a little more space. And now when I run this, it automatically executes whatever is in the definitions pane. This is a good place to put things if you actually want to save them, because up here in File, we can save the definitions. So we can save definitions, give it a name. You might want to name different practice things you do. Class 2, and put a .rkt after it for racket file, just like .doc is for a doc file and things like that. And save that in your favorite place. I'm not going to save this right now, but you may want to. One last feature that we have in Dr. Racket is what's called the stepper. The stepper allows us to step through a function one little piece at a time. It's up here in the upper right hand corner next to the run button, so we can step. We get something like this that opens up. It tells us, oh, we did Require Picturing Programs, we did beside, and it highlights the first thing it does, flip vertical, and shows you what's changed there. Notice it hasn't gotten to the rotate CW. This kind of is showing us what are the order of operations, much like in an algebra class. If we step one more, it rotates CW the cheese, does that. One more step and it says, oh, let's do the beside with those, and again shows you the final answer over on the right hand side. Okay? Lastly, all the definitions have been successfully evaluated. This stepper, again found in the upper right hand corner next to the run button, allows us to step through our functions in one step intervals or jump to any particular part of the function. Notice this one shows that there's 4 steps in executing this short little program. Okay? Rotate the frog, rotate or flip the frog, rotate the cheese, put them beside one another, and we're done. So let's do a quick review of things we've learned in this one section. Okay. We've learned several new functions. Those were flip vertical, flip horizontal, rotate CW, rotate CCW, rotate 180, above, beside, and overlay. Try many of these different functions, try combining them in different ways, and see what you get for some interesting pictures.